I tried to keep this short. I did. I tried. I failed. Well. Greetings. Let's try something a little more current. It's a generally accepted rule of thumb that you should give an anime 3 episodes to form an opinion on if it's worth watching. It allows for series that go all in at the beginning to hook people, but then progressively trend down, and allows for shows which take a couple of episodes to really get going. It won't protect you from everything, but it holds up reasonably well for the majority. 3 weeks ago, we got the first episode of a series I've been waiting to see an adaptation of for a very long time, and from what I've seen since the first episode dropped, I'm not alone. In an age where we must all accept that anime was a mistake, it's heartening to see not just a quality story be anticipated, but so far I am willing to say, adapted well. But don't relax just yet, we've only just started this journey. 3 weeks in, let's take a look at where we are. As I just said, I am, so far, quite impressed with the 86 anime. It is, so far, a solid adaptation of the novels, and though simply remaining true to the source material is not itself a qualitative judgment, given how often media that doesn't remain close to its original source fails to reach the same level of appreciation as the original material, most of the time when I say that, I mean it as a compliment. I do have slowly growing reservations, however. Some events have been rearranged in how they occur, others have been replaced entirely, though both cases remain minor so far. I can see the logic behind some of these changes. Others are a little confusing, though maybe the sense will become clear over the rest of the series' run. 3 episodes has brought us to around halfway through the first volume, so I'm expecting the first cour to reach the end of Volume 2, and the second split cour to go through Volumes 3 and 4. There are currently 9 volumes, 7 available in English, Volume 8 is listed for July, and a manga with 2 volumes, both of which are available in English. A point to consider is that the first volume was written as a standalone for a competition, and featured a time skip to an epilogue at the end of the novel. The second and third volumes then go back to cover what happened during these 2 years. We'll have to see what the anime decides to do regarding this structure. Before I get into the lacks and cuts, which I'll be spending more time on due to the necessity of covering why I think they're worth mentioning in the first place, I'd like to cover what I'm pleased with so far. The fact that I'll touch on this so quickly should not be taken as a lesser degree of care. I am really enjoying this series, more so than I have any for a long time. The music is excellent for building the mood of scenes, understated yet atmospheric, building as events grow more intense to carry the emotional weight along. Perhaps not surprising given the composer has been involved with some of the most badass tracks of recent anime, sometimes providing music the series doesn't live up to. Let's hope 86 doesn't lose its way. The animation quality is consistently impressive, the shot composition is excellent, the use of colour gives the appropriate aesthetic to each scene. The vibrant but clinical sterility of San Magnolia, using paler, washed-out colours to tie into the silver hair and eyes of the Alba, and, were I to speculate, also to hint at the lack of passion and depth to the decaying mentality of the nation, in contrast to their vaunted 5-colour flag. The repeated use of sunset when the Alban treatment of the Colorata is discussed. The warmer and deeper colours of the 86th district, tying into the diversity of the Colorata and showing, despite the decrepit state of the land, that this is where the fire of living still endures, managing to show a war zone without falling prey to the all-too-common everything is shades of brown. There's also the contrast between the rusted, industrial look of the 86's juggernauts and the sleek, inhumanly clean lines of the Legion drones. And I'd also like to geek out over the Legion having radiators as a part of their design, something you'd expect advanced electromechanical units to require. The original designs of 1-4, I have no idea how that's supposed to be pronounced, have been superbly enhanced for the animation, and indeed do a better job with the Legion units than the manga managed. Speaking of the Legion units, during their first major appearance in the second episode, I was struck by an intense feeling of familiarity to Muv-Luv. Now, I am a massive Muv-Luv fan, but I've never just started seeing it everywhere. It's a very unique setting, so whilst the broad themes of ML may be more widely found, though never to the same heights of accomplishment, things which evoke a more specific affiliation are much rarer. It might have passed me by as nothing more than a surface thought were it not for another commonality. The processors have an earpiece which projects external views and battle information directly into their eye, a change from the novels where the Juggernauts are stated to have screens inside the cockpit. As a nice touch, this display continues to project onto the eyelid should the eye of the pilot be closed, and the display is relatively large, contrasting to Mavlov's headsets which use pinpoint lasers on both eyes. However, other than Mavlov, this is the only anime I'm aware of which has that sort of retinal projector. I'm sure I'm missing some, but even so, I have to think they can't be that common if these two examples are the only ones I'm aware of. The fans of Mavlov unite. I will say, though, regarding the design of the Juggernauts primarily and the other mecha in general, ground pressure is a thing. It is stated on several occasions that the Juggernaut's legs and mobility systems are its weakest aspect, of an already weak vehicle overall, but even so, ground pressure is a thing. It's still not as bad as some cases I can think of, at least. If you wanted to design something to embed itself into the ground with each step, I'm not certain you could do much better. The use of dialogue is also written very well, significant information being delivered in short lines which say all that needs to be said. Each Legion unit gets a brief intro regarding their threat level from the 86 remarking about how they rate fighting them, as well as the critical Legion tactic of blanketing the battlefield with electromagnetic jamming by way of clouds of airborne drones. The decrepit reality of the Juggernauts they're forced to fight in is also made bluntly clear, another lie from the Alba to put on the pile. The vocal work matches this excellence, Lena being inappropriately perky, Shin's tones being repressed and weary, Theo's rant in episode 3 coming across as someone spitting out words which are piling up in his throat faster than he can say them. But the single moment which has stayed with me comes from the short anime extra scene where Lena interacts with Squadron 3 before moving to Spearhead, and Pleiades is killed, giving command to another 86. The emotion placed into the few words she speaks to Lena, the hate and rage choked behind the necessary platitudes towards somebody who is too ignorant to even understand why well-wishes are insulting coming from somebody who benefits from their suffering, and the savage exultation hearing Lena is going to be resonating with Undertaker. I was very impressed. And that being an anime original scene moves us to the alterations made for the adaptation, the first actually coming immediately upon starting the series. The opening battle of Ignat focuses solely on Shin, rather than showing him being the sole survivor of a larger group of 86 who all already respect him, and the pathetically apologetic handler in the novels is replaced with a sadistic asshole for the anime. Restricting the focus of this scene doesn't cost much. It provides an effective hook for the start of the run, especially considering it's the only action the first episode features, aside from some very brief flashes in the closing minutes. But it does remove some inferences which come to mean more later on, once certain reveals have occurred. The novels have a brief mention of Shin sensing the enemy, and the fact the handler disconnects from Shin as fast as possible before combat actually starts, as opposed to the handler of the anime staying around to gloat and starting to suffer from some unstated affliction. That Shin apparently has a promise with all the 86 he goes into combat with, and that when the handler returns after the fighting is over and asks how many aside from Shin survived, he closes the transmission without answering, as he deems it a worthless question. These are only hints which matter little right now, but will come to gain significance when put into perspective later. And they're just the first of a number of little things I don't agree with, such as the start of episode 3 undermining the death of Kai. From the title, I think we all knew someone was going to die, but why give away who so quickly? Likewise, a single line is placed into the first episode, I won't highlight which due to the circumstances not yet having been covered, the fact that they haven't yet been covered making me wonder why they put it in. These additions only seem to restrain the emotional build-ups and payoffs of the series. But I think, overall, my biggest complaint so far would be the inverse. That things keep being cut out, which don't mean much at the time you encounter them, but retroactively fit into the larger picture once more of that picture is revealed. Another case of this comes during the conversation between Lena and Annette as they discuss the para-raid, where the books specify that it was originally developed from studying people with extrasensory perception, which parts of the brain to stimulate to artificially create the same effect and allow people to consciously connect to the human collective unconscious, which is something the author admits she applies completely incorrectly. In psychological terms, the collective unconscious as described by Jung is not a shared sense of awareness between people that could be used for communication, but rather a common collection of untaught traits and instincts which most people seem to have despite lacking any reason to have developed them, such as a fear of snakes even in people who have never encountered a snake, in a country where encountering snakes is an uncommon thing. Leaving out this mention, even in passing, means the show leaves out that espers exist in this setting. It also leaves out that the raid system was developed from noticing that espers resonated with other members of their family, so the para-raid fakes a genetic relationship to allow resonance to occur. That because the primary researcher who developed the system was a Colorata and so became an 86, they wouldn't be able to find him to keep researching their raid system even if they wanted to, as all 86 have their records destroyed. And that Annette's father died due to an apparent accident in testing, where the raid system was inadvertently set to the highest theoretical setting, destroying his mind. The same conversation also ends up being a bit misleading. It states that the raid system is only used to share hearing because trying to share other senses, such as vision, would place excessive strain on the brain. In the novels, this point is more precisely made. Trying to share vision with multiple people at once, such as a single handler to a squadron, would burn out their brain, whilst hearing is limited enough to be safe and also allows for a certain detachment to be maintained between the handler and the processors. You don't need to share the chaos of battle, the visceral fear of risking your body, the sight of that body being torn and broken. They're just voices in the dark, after all. You don't even know what they look like. Early on, Lena's breakfast with her mother is greatly truncated, leaving out how racist and discriminatory her mother is towards any non-Alba, even as she hypocritically preaches about the supposed values of tolerance and inclusion. Also leaving out that San Magnolia is suffering a food crisis, relying on synthetic food made in factories due to a lack of land. Though the well-off do supplement this with small luxuries, such as homegrown raspberries or cakes, things unavailable to the regular punter. Mention is also made of the isolation of the country due to the Legion jamming, meaning they don't even know if other countries still exist, let alone being able to receive support from them, perhaps making their treatment of the Colorata even more heinous. Far from their prided stance of being the first nation in the world to encourage immigration and diversity, they now might be the last nation to exist, and they're oppressing anyone not like themselves to the point of genocide. This is reinforced by Lena mentally remarking about how everything is stuck in time, looking to the past, escaping to more comfortable delusions where they don't need to confront the realities not just of the outside world demanding violent acknowledgement, but of their own failures to reach the standards they venerate. Far easier to just redefine what might be problematic so that it no longer applies. Then you can continue to believe you're virtuous and just, even as you perpetrate the exact same atrocities you point at history and condemn others for allowing. Lena tries to point this out at a very basic level, but just gives up when she's met only with confusion from her mother, the older woman simply unable to process the cognitive dissonance she exists under. Moving outside the Grand Mur, our initial look at Spearhead is a new inclusion, showing us before when the story in the novels first started. Originally, Cujo had already died 10 days prior, his 120 days till out message not having been updated since. Additionally, his manner of death is quite different. In the novels and manga, he died to an anti-personnel mine, having mistaken it for a wounded soldier during a rescue mission at night. The mines are stated to look vaguely like humans, and the manga makes them look really very creepy. This plays in a minor way to the changes made for the anime reaching the original introduction to Spearhead. Raiden is shown scavenging with other members of the squad as opposed to alone, leaving out a scene about how years-old canned food is still superior to the processed rations provided by the Alba. If they have to live on synthetic food, you can imagine what they provide to the 86. And when he meets up with the squad, a joke about him being late due to stepping on a mine is quickly shut down as being too soon. Before that, Raiden and Fido come across the skeleton of a fallen Alba soldier from the initial fighting 9 years before. Fido inquires if it should retrieve anything. As the 86 are forbidden from retrieving the bodies of their fallen, another little point which will build into something greater, Shin taught Fido to bring back personal effects from the dead. But Raiden expresses respect for the fallen Alba, differentiating him from those who hide behind walls and force others to die on their behalf. It's a brief moment, but it highlights that, whilst the 86 can be just as racist towards the Alba as the treatment they receive, it is still based on how they're treated, rather than the ethnic discrimination of the Alba. And this point is somewhat made in Episode 3, with the contrast between Karina's blanket hate for all Alba, and Kai's willingness to consider that some exceptions may still exist, but the lack of the multiple instances I think is a loss. Staying with Spearhead, the post-battle check-in from Lena leaves out a few more minor, but possibly significant, bits as well. The 86 quickly unloading and holstering their firearms when Lena comes online, because 86 are forbidden from having personal weapons in case of insurrection. The fact they all do, showing how little they Alba care to even ensure the rules they set for their own supposed safety, and how complacent they are. Raiden's response to Lena after she's called Shin out on repeatedly sending the exact same after-action report is also missing, stating that Shin's been doing it for years at this point, leading to the reveal that all of these teenagers have already been fighting for these negligent presses for years. Their reactions to Lena trying to be cheerful about their service almost being up are also much more overtly contemptuous, underlining that none of them expect to make it that far, so thinking about it is a luxury only the truly out of touch could indulge. Kaie's accidental shopping of Shin's ability to provide proper reports is also slightly altered, with, rather than the anime saying he's too lazy to bother, Kaie musing that he's currently reading a book on philosophy that's above her head, at the exact time he's allowing Lena to believe that he's just an illiterate 86. That not just Shin, but also the other 86 are far more intelligent than might be expected given the deliberate squalor they've been forced into since childhood is made repeatedly in the novels, such as with Shin recalling a vague memory as they wait for the Legion to arrive, quoting the Bible in Latin, which Theo responds to and complained about its lack of taste given the situation. Dicit ei legio nomen mihi. My name is Legion, for we are many. As I somewhat expected after Episode 1, much of the first scene with Spearhead from the novels is moved back to Episode 3 in the anime. I'm not sure it was necessary, but having the vignettes of Spearhead bonding be in the same episode as Kai's death does consolidate the pathos, though how her death is handled then undermines it again. In the original material, she was the first death we actually suffered in the story, so she did get some focus right from Spearhead's initial introduction to make it land more powerfully. The manga actually adds a small amount more material with her to increase the impact further, and I think I'd have liked to see the anime do the same, but I'm not especially willing to criticize that it didn't. It's a fine line to draw, complaining when some changes are made but then chastising when others are not. Though I am unsure why the anime chose to confuse things by saying the girls were bathing rather than the novels straight up having them doing laundry, which is why they're still clothed. Thankfully, the anime didn't change that for the low titillation, though it did change Daya actually coming to give them a message into him actively peeping. Episode 3 also has a distracting chronology issue, where it shows the half of the conversation between Spearhead and Lena from Spearhead's perspective, then later goes back to show the same conversation from Lena's perspective, without making it clear that it had regressed in time for quite a while. I feel the scene with Lena finding the maps could have been moved to maintain a tighter continuity. Indeed, it's another small anime addition, whereas in the novels the fact Lena has been finding such maps doesn't come up until during the later battle, and even the manga only gives it a single page. I was also surprised that Kai's death was treated so dispassionately, given less attention than in the novels, and certainly less than the manga, which presents it from her point of view. And once again, the anime leaves out a small detail which will become very significant. More than one, in fact, though sourced from the same place. All these little cuts are not yet building into something significant enough to hazard the show, but they are increasing. It may well be that Episode 4 will again jump back in time to show us another side of an event we've already moved past, as with the discussion between Kaie and Lena, but that speculation is out with the scope of this video. And so I'll move back to the biggest single change the anime makes, the insertion of a lecture scene where Lena tries to counter the propaganda being fed to a group of military students, to little avail. The primary reason for this scene is exposition, the need to provide the audience with information the light novels can impart much more easily. Indeed, the withdrawal of the Alba to the 85 districts and the creation of the 86 is given in the very first chapter of the novel, and goes into much more depth. I'm curious as to why they left it out, one point in particular. Perhaps it's an unusual attempt at tact on the part of Japan, considering the export market, as what became the Special Wartime Peace Preservation Act, the creation of the 86, was Presidential Order No. 6609. Students of history may notice the blatant inference to Executive Order 9066, the internment of Japanese, Italian, and German Americans during World War II, as well as some Jewish refugees from Germany, as few distinctions were made. Not that Nazi Germany is left out. Notably, the paragraphs talking about this in the novels are clear that the order was racially based, as it was phrased with language stating all Colorata are supporters of the Empire which had declared war, and so would be considered enemies of the Republic, despite Alba from the Empire not being included, and Colorado of confirmed Republic descent yet being targeted. They go on to say that the general acceptance of this destruction of the principles of San Magnolia, too few Alba speaking up against it, was in part due to the resource pressures on land and food, in part due to propaganda against the Colorado to excuse the technological inferiority the Alba realized existed between their assumed cultural superiority and the actual capabilities of the Legion, but mostly because, when faced with their reality crashing down around them, most people simply want someone to take it out on, and the Colorado were offered up as a sacrifice. Thus the mental gymnastics where, because the Alban San Magnolia was so welcoming, tolerant, and inclusive, they were clearly superior to everyone else, thus it's only appropriate for the inferior Colorado to benefit them. The logic is painfully simple, to the degree that questioning it almost becomes akin to questioning other obvious laws of nature. When your starting fixed point is being a virtuous person, you can justify anything you do as good, because you've already determined that you are good. Beyond the needed exposition, however, the scene also tries to set Lena up as far more sympathetic than she should be at this point in the story. In the novels, Lena has been mildly outspoken regarding the treatment of the 86, confronting it when it crossed her path and regretting the state of the Republic, but she's very casual about it. She does not overtly seek out opportunities to speak up about the oppression of the Colorado. It's almost an intellectual concern of hers rather than something she actually feels when it's not directly in front of her. This scene has her being too passionate about it too soon. Though it does show an additional aspect of the Alban oppression, the use of the education infrastructure to indoctrinate new generations into the zeitgeist. Some may have a different interpretation, that the student who spoke up was using the textbook to merely excuse his existing bigotry, but I would offer that it could easily have been an honest take. Dehumanization is typically a learned behavior, either through experience or society, and it's surprisingly easy to impart such beliefs if you have people already existing in a receptive mindset. The students in that lecture theatre are young, naive, and in a place where they expect to be enlightened. There, they are being given information from people in authority and accepted sources, which clearly state things which should seem to be patently horrific and nonsensical. But there it is in print, and from the mouths of those who should know. Add to that the fact that everyone around you is saying the same thing, so not only are you inclined to accept teachers know better than you, but you have the peer pressure of wanting to be accepted by your fellow students. An incredibly strong drive that can overwhelm most people and push them to unthinkable lengths for fear of being ostracized. Which brings me to the white elephant in the room. Yes, one of the primary aspects of 86 is racism, others being the horrors of war, especially clean wars, and the glory of garter belts. No, I'm not joking. However, it is probably not your racism. 86 does not take a side. It highlights how easy it is to other for whatever reason can be found, shows that everyone can be prone to doing so, and condemns it all equally. The distinct features of the Alba are silver hair and eyes, close enough to white to allow for some conclusions to be grabbed, and they oppress the colorata. But keep in mind, the colorata are simply everyone else. Kaye is stated to be Oriental, but there are also redheads and blondes present, and she was majority Alban with only a distant Carulian ancestor, and Daya is a clear Orion stereotype. Discrimination based on hair colour is no less stupid than any of the real-world forms it's taken. We don't need to interpret it as a veiled allegory for anything. Hell, ask gingers how they enjoy not having souls if you think hair colour has never actually been used to other people. The justification can come after the fact. People will find a reason to do what they want to do. I should state that the novels are also clear that, within the internment camps, the Colorado also discriminated amongst themselves. Indeed, There's a strong implication of more than one of Spearhead suffering horrific treatment. 86 does not fall into the trap of thinking this behavior is unique to only some groups of humanity. The degree may vary, but it all flows to the same end. Anyway, 3 episodes down and a long way to go. I strongly advise people, if these episodes have even slightly caught your interest, keep watching. There's a lot yet to come.